It's 2 minutes to 1 o'clock here in Sydney. I have with me Pez Moradi. Pez, I'm sorry, I hope I said your name correctly.
You wouldn't be the
Pez,
first, so it's Pezh. Pezh. I've got
Pez,
called all
Pez.
types of
Okay.
names over the years.
Oh gosh, can you believe it? I'm the host, and I don't even know your name. I mean, like, say it properly. Pej, welcome to the show. Pej, so that we can get off on a relaxed note. I usually ask my guests what's their favorite color and why.
Ooh, ah, geez, I've been around.
Got you there.
Having three kids, I've asked I've asked this question, and I'll have to give you a scientific answer. My favorite color would be white because it's made up of all of the colors.
Ooh,
Yeah,
white.
so I'd say red,
Very
orange, yellow, blue,
nice.
indigo,
Very
violet.
nice.
Taking me
Very
back to high
nice.
school, but
Yeah, sure, sure. White is professional, clinical. It's almost like very detail oriented, which I
mm.
think you're that sort of person. So thanks for that. Pesh, tell us a bit about yourself. You're the managing director and COO of MacArthur. Tell us about your journey, how you got to this point.
Of course, and firstly, thank you, Simon, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I guess a little bit about me. I'm a career executive, as I'd like to think. My background spans through law, venture capital, early stage ventures, and over the years, I've had the privilege of running both an incubator and a venture capital firm. And I've had hands-on experience with commercializing, growing technology, and some professional services along the way.
Mhm.
So that's where my career started. If I take a step back before then, my career started in engineering. Not so much as an engineer myself. I have the utmost respect for engineers. In fact, I place them really high up there on the ladder. But I've worked really closely with engineers my whole life. The past 8 years, I've primarily worked as a chief operating officer, general manager, and managing director at MacArthur,
Mhm.
with a broad range of responsibilities from technology to finance. I've led major digital transformations across workforce planning, care
Cool.
services, and operations. My focus is and has always been on building economies of scale, whether that's corporatizing operations, embedding systems to enable sustainable growth or
Yep.
aggressive growth. If I
Yep.
take a step back into venture capital and merger acquisitions, a lot of that would be systemizing not just processes, the culture, the people, um, into, I guess, an alignment of the hearts and minds, as I'd always refer to it. My lens is pretty multidisciplinary, so I draw on legal, marketing, and finance frameworks
Yep.
and technology, obviously, to solve some challenges and drive some strategic outcomes. So
Mhm.
much of my work involves balancing innovation with practical execution. So
Mhm.
aligning commercial priorities along with ethical and governance frameworks. More recently, in areas like AI adoption and business readiness for scale.
Mhm.
AI, in its sense, has been around for quite some time. So, 2011, 12, I would get a lot of businesses pitching that their business is AI enabled. You know, when you peel a few layers off, it might be machine learning, but chances are it's a spreadsheet in the background. The more modern AI is a bit different.
Sure.
Outside of work, I've spent my years volunteering. I contribute back to the early stage tech ecosystem, and I support cause-driven organisation. I've worked with Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children. I've
Nice.
supported medical research through FSHD Global, and I've spent some years teaching ethics, which is focused on helping young people develop critical thinking and moral reasoning. So ultimately, I'm driven by a bit of impact, whether that's building companies or supporting meaningful ventures, and hopefully contributing to causes that matter.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. So one of the things that caught my attention was digital transformation. Um, and first of all, I just like to say I'm really impressed with the number of hats you wear. So that's really awesome. Now, digital transformation is quite of interest to me because I went through a program which was quite disastrous. Would you like to share on what your experience with leading a successful digital transformation so that it doesn't become like, something that produces white elephants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, coincidentally, that's a lot of the time I would get called upon. So when things are messy, when there's a misalignment, when there's new technology that perhaps people want to implement but not sure how. So sometimes that's where the real change start is very much in the planning phase. And simplistically put, it starts with the problem. And I know that that's, we've probably heard that to death, but with investment, with technology adoption, with digital
Yeah.
transformation,
Yeah.
typically we like to look at the problem. And some problems are not so obvious or so
Mm,
overt, and some
mm,
may be future problems, as in the competition may be
mm,
streamlining how they operate, which may reduce their operating expenses.
mhm.
Therefore, they can charge less and become more competitive advantage. That could be a future problem, not so much now.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it
Mm,
depends on the industry, it depends on the people. I think the change management's always a big key. Um,
yeah.
because it's process based. So if I was to speak with the founder and
Yeah.
founders, particularly tech founders, they get really bogged down into the code and into what it is we're building, and sometimes they need to focus more on, well, what's the process? What are the behaviors that we're changing?
Mhm,
Um, I've
mhm,
seen many companies fail with
mhm,
incredible tech,
mhm,
incredible engineers,
mhm,
and maybe not the best execution, or in more
mhm.
often than not the right timing. So they may have a
Right.
solution,
Ah,
but the
mhm.
market itself isn't ready to change those behaviors.
Got it.
QR
Yeah.
codes, as an example, we
Mm.
were building QR code
Yes.
products
Yeah.
20 years ago, 15 years ago, and it was unheard of because you
Yeah.
needed an app to download the QR reader, and
Yes.
therefore you
Absolutely.
could use that. Um, and so a lot of businesses would have these ideas and low Bluetooth technology to replace them.
Hmm.
Problem being was the tech in the market wasn't ready. So
Yeah.
although that's a great idea for then, fast forward
Mhm,
QR codes, and clearly
mhm,
pandemics and things
mhm.
digitize and make things, expedite things a bit quicker.
Yeah.
But now it's a bit more mainstream. In fact, it's native in a lot of the phones.
Yes.
You look at the
Yes.
disruptors in the past.
Yeah.
Um, Particularly in Australia, and my focus has been on the Australian tech market, but more so internationally. And use famous cases, the Facebooks out there, and Facebook
Mhm,
wasn't anything special.
mhm.
It was special when it came to mobile phones. Your MySpace was around before that, but
Yes.
mobile
Yes.
phones weren't mainstream then, so
Yeah.
they're on computers. So
Yeah.
a lot of it's timing, bit
Mhm,
of luck, but
mhm,
timing I think is really important. But when we
mhm.
talk about digital transformation, it's really understanding all those nuances. If it's
Yeah.
an internal digital transformation, well, the people
Yeah.
are important. Taking them on that journey, I
Yeah.
think, is key.
Mhm.
Having them to have skin in the game. So by
Yes.
asking
Yeah.
questions and building
Yeah.
out use cases with them,
Yeah.
asking
Yeah.
them what the problem is, and
Yeah.
ranking them and categorizing them and building out project plans, and to see
Mhm,
what is actually feasible and what's not.
mhm, mhm.
Um, there's a lot of snake oil out there, or people
Yes.
think that this is going to be a silver bullet that's going to solve
Sure.
all my
Right.
administrative problems.
Yeah.
But behaviors aren't willing to change. So
Yeah.
I mentioned it before, but I think the hearts and the minds are equally as important. You need to
Yes.
take people on a
Yeah.
journey so
Yeah.
that they understand, well, what's the end game here?
Mhm,
And if it's got
mhm.
to do with change, how are they carving out time to make way for that
Yeah.
change?
Yeah.
Above all,
Yeah.
we can build the shiniest tools,
Yeah.
um, but if people haven't backfilled their role to learn that tool,
Yeah.
or they don't have their data in a format that's going
Mm.
to be ingested appropriately,
Yes. Yeah.
or the tech is streamlining something that may be a personal touch point in that industry.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
Picking up the phone and having that softer approach,
Yeah.
maybe that's part of
Yeah.
it. So
That's
automating that part
yeah.
may take away or detract from something else. So I always try to
Mm.
look at it more holistically.
Yep.
Obviously, look at the finances and work back return on
Sure.
investment, as
Yes.
people
Yes.
are always
Yeah.
harping on.
Yeah.
But besides that, not just that, is how this may affect cross divisional functions, how this
Mm.
may affect, if you've got multiple brands, the other brand that
Mhm,
may be sitting there.
mhm.
So it's important to understand that from the outset,
Yep.
and take people on a journey. I think a
Yeah.
narrative is
Yeah.
always good,
Yeah.
and understanding it's not a silver bullet. Sometimes things may
Yeah.
fail or may not be that perfect solution,
Yeah.
whether we
Correct.
build or buy, or anything in between.
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
transparent, I think, certainly
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah.
Milestones and all those things that you see in agile product
Yes.
development.
Yeah. 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 You spoke about hearts and minds, and I think that that is such a key thing, the corporate culture. Do you have any tips for, let's say, executives and boards, who are looking to really, you know, uh, make their digital transformation uh, meaningful, and to leverage this hearts and minds angle?
Yes, and if we talk about AI and AI seems to be the hot topic, but
Yeah,
AI, technology, automation, machine learning,
yeah,
we can bundle that all in. But AI is
yeah,
now, or AI strategy is becoming very much a boardroom topic,
yeah,
not just an IT one.
yeah,
So we need leaders in the communities who understand both the margin and the machine logic. So
yeah,
it starts there. Is We hear a lot about AI automates this and does that, and it's very easy for someone to use a generative language model and
yeah,
say, oh, well, this is going to change everything, and
yeah,
build a strategy. But I think it's
yeah,
about being a little bit more calculated,
mm,
understanding, well, is it a real need,
mm,
firstly,
mm, mm,
and asking the question of, well, who is this going to impact? If I
mm,
automate this function,
mm,
is it going to make this cohort of employees more efficient,
mm,
or is it going
mm,
to make them redundant?
mm.
So then we've got to ask, from a strategic perspective, are we trying to get efficiencies or redundancies?
Right.
Are we
Yeah,
trying to be more accurate,
yeah,
or are we trying to be more compliant? So there's all these
mm,
variables, and it's really understanding them. So
yeah,
again, I go back to what's the problem they're solving, and
yeah,
how do we communicate that problem, and
yeah,
is it a real problem?
yeah,
How is this going to affect the people that are going to adopt it? Because
mm,
fundamentally, the hearts
mm,
come from people. That's probably
yes,
one of the key areas. Is it's
yeah,
very easy to dictate top down
yeah, absolutely,
approaches to digital
yes, yes,
transformation.
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's a lot more challenging with a bottom up approach,
yeah,
and if there's competing interests as well. So I
yes,
think
yes, yes,
authenticity. I
yeah,
think we've always got this dichotomy between designers and engineers, or at least in my world,
yeah,
designers and marketers would always
yeah,
contrast with
yeah,
engineers and
yes,
coders. And now
yes,
we're seeing them morph together.
yeah,
But now we've got to see, well, executives and leaders and middle management and
mm,
consultants and workers
mhm,
being
mhm,
conversant with
yeah,
technology, and
right,
also being realistic about their expectations. It's
yeah,
not a
yeah,
matter of a replacement. I
mhm,
think industries fundamentally, I think, me personally, I'm a rational optimist. We've always got this doom and gloom. This is going to happen, and it's going to take away jobs. And there was a book. You may have read this, Simon. I think Freakonomics was its name, and
yes,
they
yes,
talk about over the years, and another one, rational optimism. I forget what it's called, but over the
mm,
years, everyone's had this doom and gloom
yeah,
about, we're going to run out of wheat in the earth, and by 1960, there's not going to be enough wheat to feed the human beings, the population growth. Well, guess what happened? Research and development happened. So instead of taking 20 hectares to build a certain yield of wheat, it takes 1 hectare now. So technology changed that. So that was no longer a thing, this doom and gloom. Industrial revolution, same thing. Everything's going to be automated. Well, guess what? A whole bunch of new jobs were created, efficiencies were created, and wealth was
yeah,
created, and
yeah,
capitalism was created. The
yes,
tech revolution, 2000s, the
mhm,
tech bubble, lots of businesses came in
yeah,
and disrupted things.
yeah,
Look at the real estate industry. Oh, it's going to be disrupted by REA and
yeah,
domain. Well,
yeah,
no, real estate agents are leveraging that, and it's become a
yeah,
platform, and it's probably
yeah,
enhanced some of them.
mhm,
AI, in my opinion, same thing. Being a rational
yeah,
optimist, it will
yeah,
help industry.
yeah,
Those that adopt it, great. Those that don't,
yeah,
it's not the end of the world,
yeah,
but there will be more opportunities, and it's still early days, I guess.
yes,
Time will
absolutely,
tell. It's
yeah,
ever changing.
yeah, yeah, wonderful. Um, as you were talking about wheat, I remember there was this part of Cockatoo Island. I can't remember. They actually had this. Was it Cockatoo Island? There was this section where they I must have mixed up with something. Where they actually had contain sections to store wheat. To hoard wheat. And the need went away, and wheat was never stored in that section.
Mm,
So yeah. All the assumptions, always keep on changing. We live in a world where, um, you know, things just, change by the hour. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
And
Now,
humans fundamentally, solve things. We
Yeah.
need to give ourselves a little bit more credit. And I know that media and life, it can be daunting, and it's very
Yeah.
easy to fall into the trap of
Yeah.
pessimism. But
Yes.
look back, just look back in the last 100 years, how great we are as a
Mhm,
species. Look back in the last
mhm,
1,000. Look
mhm.
at the power it used to take to light a room a
Yeah.
100 years ago, which is a
Yeah.
blip on the radar.
Yeah.
Let alone now with LED lighting, and
Yeah.
that used to be a judgment to say, well, the amount you earn is how much it takes to light up your home. Now
Yeah.
that's not the case. To turn a light on, we don't even
Absolutely.
think about it with renewable energy and LED
Lovely.
lighting and so on. And
Yes.
that's going to change.
Yes.
That's going to have
Yeah.
its next evolution.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
important that we're rational. It's important that we're optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I love that because I think that there has been a lot of negative commentary about people losing jobs, and I think people were actually struggling with mental health, on top of all these issues of layoffs and all that. So it's great. Thank you for that ray of optimism, and logic. Because I don't know why these AI vendors keep on broadcast the doom and gloom message. But yeah,
It's
it's
easier.
great.
It's an
Yeah.
easier sell. AI
Yes. Yeah.
fundamentally is not here to
Yeah.
replace. It's it's
Mhm.
it's not here to replace humans. It may replace human inefficiencies. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
If it's going to make it more commercial, then absolutely, that
Sure.
actually creates more opportunity in the
Yeah.
bigger scheme of things.
Yeah. 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 Perfect. Wonderful. We're gonna switch angle a little bit. One of my topics, which I quite am interested in, is the area of governance, and I think you're very familiar with not just the space, but also how tough it is for now increasingly SMEs to operate in compliance with Australian business and tax regulations and compliance. Would you have any thing to share to encourage business owners who are who need to be really careful about the way they run their business, yet at the same time not be bogged down by fear of the authorities?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, most discussions around AI regulation at this point are reactive. So, firstly, we need proactive scenario modeling. I think that
yeah,
that goes without saying. We
yeah,
need to understand that we do know that regulation sometimes is lacking, but so is imagination. Right. So, governance in AI, it must evolve beyond compliance checklists. It's about
yeah,
contextual decision making.
yeah,
Who's
yeah.
accountable when machine recommends something harmful or inefficient?
Hmm.
Um, we've and we tend to look at AI, and one of the things that keeps popping up in forums,
Hmm.
anybody that is dabbling, testing, experimenting, um, is around safeguards. And I
Yeah,
think that's going
yeah,
to be a big piece, not just for
yes,
industries in general or peak bodies,
hmm,
government itself.
hmm,
Um, there's cyber risks. There's
yes,
risks that machine learning, depending on how it's coded,
yeah,
they don't hallucinate. It's
hmm,
a computer that's
hmm,
given certain prompts or certain code. So
yeah,
yes, it can by all means get it wrong,
hmm,
but they're not hallucinating a lot of the time. A lot of time it comes up to our interpretation or how we build it.
hmm,
Um,
hmm,
so I think governance is a very, very prudent place to start,
hmm,
not to get bogged down too much. Now, again, it depends on the industry you're in. If you're
yeah,
dealing with sensitive information, you're
yes,
relying on this to
yeah,
make decisions that could be impactful, whether
yeah,
discriminatory or erroneously giving you information because of the data
yes,
set. Now, AI
yes,
could be closed, it could be open.
yeah,
Again, it all
mhm,
depends on how it's configured.
yeah,
So I think it's important to understand and build those safeguards or guardrails in
mhm,
from the
mhm,
start.
mhm,
It's important to test and experiment
yes,
those things. Try to
yeah,
break it. And I know
yeah,
I was running an engineering firm when we were incubating companies, and one of the things we would do
yeah,
with testing, regression testing,
yeah,
or UAT in general, quality
mhm,
assurance, is
mhm,
let's try to break this thing. Let's get somebody who's
yes,
not tech
yeah,
savvy,
yeah,
and you sort of need to apply some of that logic in with
mhm,
AI. But for
mhm,
business owners who are getting into any form of tech, Well,
Yeah.
governance is key. Governance, I
Yeah.
think you lead by that. You do that well, and
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
development follows. You
Yeah.
do that well, just you make the smarter
Yeah.
decisions,
Yeah.
a little bit more
Yeah.
a little bit more intent and calculated.
Hmm.
But with AI, it's
Hmm.
very easy to cut those corners.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
slippery slope, because if you do
Sure.
not have guardrails up,
Yes.
and then you go hell for
Yeah.
leather and implement something, it
Yeah.
could be too late.
Yeah.
You could be
Yeah.
exposed, and
Hmm.
then because
Hmm.
everyone's relying on this process change, they
Yes.
become reliant
Yes.
on it. And
Yeah.
one small
Hmm.
mistake
Hmm.
can exponentially, and
Yeah.
particularly if you don't pick up on it for many
Yes.
years,
Absolutely.
can cost a livelihood.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think it's important. I think
Hmm.
it's not something to stress and lose sleep over. It's
Hmm.
something that just needs a bit of strategic intent,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
good round table and an
Yeah.
understanding from different
Yeah.
lenses is important. Again,
Yes.
depending on
Yes.
the industry, look at
Yeah.
it from the
Mm.
frontline
Mm.
employee, look at it
Mm.
from the senior leadership that's
Yeah.
trying to get management
Yeah.
reports, look at
Yeah.
it from the engineer that's
Mm.
building, look at it
Mm.
from the marketing perspective that's got
Mhm.
outward bound
Mhm.
communications, and
Mhm.
sort of see where these failure points could exist
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
risk mitigations are in there. And again, it's
Mhm.
difficult to answer when AI, it
Yeah.
can be quite broad depending on the
Yeah.
function you need it for.
Sure. Sure. I like it that you have all these many hats of experience, to draw from. And I think, since we're on this topic, for boards looking to hire CEOs, don't you agree that, a multidisciplinary candidate is, highly desired, because, I mean, we live, like we said, we live in a world that's constantly changing, so we really need leadership of a company who really understands, these, all these different facets, rather than come in and, just bark orders, and I was listening to a podcast about ancient generals. They used to put on full armor and go out to war with the soldiers, so they understand what it's like on the battlefields. And uh it's not flattery, but I like to think that you're sort of like a digital equivalent of that, because you have all these skills, you have all these experience and all these hats. So wouldn't you agree that, when boards, decide to choose, their executive team, that they should be looking at people with a broad and deep, sort of experience?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
personally, I guess it depends, and I know that's a
Mm.
strange way to say it, but I personally think absolutely. I
Yeah.
think, um, and sometimes again to my detriment, I sweat the small stuff, and sweating the small stuff can be good, and
Yes.
it can help with leadership, as in the people you work with. You're on the journey with them. You're adding value.
Sure.
You're on the front
Yeah.
lines. You're the
Yeah.
general with the quote unquote armor on,
Mhm.
and that helps gain trust.
Mhm.
And that helps people go above and beyond, and that's how you get marginal gains out of your team.
Yeah.
Um, there's been countless studies done on different leadership styles being more of a dictatorship
Yeah.
versus being more collaborative. And
Yeah.
every study shows that productivity comes when we make and we work with evangelicals in our business. How does that
Yeah.
happen? Well, that
Yeah.
happens by understanding. Um,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
always pride myself on being a colleague first. So the word boss, it makes me cringe more than anything. And if I hear it, um, I do, I don't mind sensei, but the rest is a little bit disturbing. And in this modern era,
Mhm.
if you go back 20, 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
sure, some person may need it to be single focused in the
Yeah.
fast moving consumable industry or the mining industry, and
Yeah.
they know that, and they just know
Yeah.
how those financial mechanisms work in different
Yeah.
industries.
Yeah.
Leaders need to be more charismatic.
Mhm.
Other industries, they need to be more technical. So in
Yeah.
the tech space, the good
Yeah.
leaders, they're the
Yeah.
engineers.
Yeah.
You sometimes have leaders in sales,
Mhm.
leaders that are good at sales, that can add
Mhm.
value from business
Yes.
development.
Yeah.
But maybe,
Yeah.
could that contrast with culture and
Mhm.
people and the
Yeah.
heart side of it? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think being a generalist in a leadership
Yes.
position,
Yeah.
does help because
Yes. Yeah.
businesses fundamentally are
Yeah.
multidiscipline. So
Hmm.
to lead
Yeah.
multidisciplinary teams, you need to
Mhm.
know at least enough
Yes.
about what's their plight, what's their
Yeah.
journey, what are their
Yeah.
pain points.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you can be considered perhaps ignorant to what they're
Yeah.
going through and
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so again, it depends on the business life
Mhm.
cycle. It depends on the
Mhm.
industry that they're in.
Mhm.
I found some of the most successes have come from
Mhm.
people in one industry going into
Yeah.
another and
Yeah.
bringing this different lens. Because
Right.
if you're in media, as an
Yeah.
example, and you've
Yeah.
been in media
Yeah.
your whole life, you've got this
Yes.
myopic lens, and then you
Yes.
get
Yeah.
an engineer or you get a marketing person that's come
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
a different space altogether, and then
Sure.
they bring that to the media lens and say, hey,
Yeah.
we're looking at a traditional
Yeah.
archaic model
Yeah.
of omni-channel marketing. We need to
Yeah.
be looking at this, that, and the other, and here are some
Yeah.
tools, and we need to
Yeah.
be looking at things in a
Yes.
quite
Yes.
different lens. And that in
Yeah.
itself helps.
Mm.
So I think the
Yeah.
cross pollination of industries and people certainly
Yeah.
helps. And I think
Yeah.
having a broad understanding
Yeah.
will absolutely, it's certainly going to help with the
Mhm.
hearts and minds. And again, you build on the hearts and minds,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
things
The
tend to fall
culture.
into place. You've got the right
Yeah.
governance, you've got the
Yeah.
right structure, you've got
Yeah.
scalable processes.
Yeah.
Well, you need the people to fit in all that, and that always helps
Absolutely.
when it
Absolutely.
is a bit
Yeah.
more broad.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Let me see how we doing for time. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. Um, all right. So I'd like to now shift again and now focus on your investor experience. So you've seen a lot of companies, boot up from the ground up and take flight. What advice would you have for the Australia's startups? Those people who are, let's say, just laid off and just trying to start their own company, right up to scale ups. People who have 10 people, and are thinking of just growing, especially in today's environment. I mean, this year has been just nuts in terms of all the economic and geopolitical storm, so much distraction. What's the thing that business owners, founders should be focused on, and not be distracted?
Um, well, I've worked on both sides, so advising founders onto the boardroom side for the investors, and I've learned and experienced
Yeah.
what investors want to hear and what founders need to survive.
Yeah.
Um, and there's almost a trifecta. You have investors, you have founders, and then you have the people that work in
Yes.
that business.
Yeah.
So my advice is, um, it needs to make sense for all three parties.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
can't have one disadvantaged over another, because that can
Mhm.
create disillusion. So if it's an
Yeah.
early stage startup,
Yeah.
um, traditional advice:
Mhm.
solve the problem, prove that it's solved, address the market,
Yeah.
find a customer, get at least $1 of revenue. Do
Yes.
not have
Yeah.
delusions of grandeur. Look
Yes.
for investors that,
Mm.
particularly investors that are, they're emotionally attached to the business as well. You can have a fund that throws money at something.
Yeah.
Great, that's awesome. But are they
Mm.
going to follow up the next round? So it's really, from a founder perspective, is having clear milestones. If it's an
Yeah.
early stage, I need X amount of dollars to get me to here, and
Yes.
then I
Yes.
will need Y, and take them on that journey. I've seen time and time again,
Mhm.
founders say, I need money for growth, and then they
Yeah.
get the money, and then they
Mm.
grow a little bit, and then they
Yeah.
need more money, and then
Oh.
more and
Yeah.
more. And then
Yeah.
before you know it, everyone's diluted, everyone's disillusioned.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I've
Yes.
seen founders that are, very passionate, and then investors have come in and said, oh, no, that's not the right person for that business. We're going to put a corporate CEO in, and
Right.
then business collapse because that passion
Right.
has then been
Yeah.
sucked out of it. So the
Yeah.
advice that I have for founders and business owners is,
Yeah.
try to do as much yourself.
Yes.
Appreciate the people,
Mm.
because the moment you open your doors,
Mm.
um, those investors or those board members, well, they've got a strategic say
Yes.
in how that business
Yeah.
is going to run.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the and I would review 1,200 businesses plus each year, and we
Oh.
would invest in the top 0.7%. We had the stats. So
Oh.
very few and a big broad range, and we'd have to do due diligence on every one of these. And it got to a point where it's become very objective. We had
Mm.
spreadsheets and tables that would rank their intellectual
Mhm.
property,
Mm.
their
Mm.
marketing strategy, who
Mm.
their competitors were. Will Google replace them? We had so many businesses that were great, and then Google just did it for free the next day. So like, oh well,
Oh
there's
my
no
gosh.
commercial side
Right.
of things, and
Yeah.
the value of data is not that valuable anymore. But one of the
Mhm,
most important thing were the people,
mhm, mhm.
because businesses can fundamentally change, but the founders not. So if
Yes.
you find
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
who may be on the spectrum as an engineer who's really great, has built this product,
Yeah.
but they're not willing to change. They've got this view of this
Right.
is what I want my business
Yeah.
to be. And
Yeah.
they could be right for the next 1 or 2 years. But then you
Mhm.
have investors say, hey, well, we need to get a return on that. Are you
Yes.
willing to open up and move from this
Yeah.
industry to that? And
Yeah.
if the founder's stubborn, it would be kind of a hard no for us, because
Mhm,
it
mhm,
may work in the very small cases. And people
mhm,
see those really
mhm.
small success stories and base
Yeah.
all their businesses
Yeah.
around that to say,
Yeah.
well, that
Yeah.
business is a unicorn. It's got $1 billion valuation, and this is what they did. I deal with the 99.9%. And great, there are those unicorns out there, and they're incredible journeys and incredible stuff that they've done.
Yeah.
99.9% of businesses, they struggle, they grow piece by piece, and you need to be part of that journey. So founders
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
have strategic intent, they need to have their
Mhm.
goals, and they need to
Yeah.
pick the right investors, and don't dilute too early, and
Yeah.
don't have delusions of grandeur either.
Mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and for scale ups, I guess
Yeah.
look at AI and tech. How can you scale with the tech, and reward and acknowledge the people that are in and journeying,
Yeah.
growing that
Yeah.
business on that journey with
Yeah.
you. They're going to
Yeah.
make the difference in the long run.
Mhm.
It's the people that are growing the
Yeah.
culture and the brand of
Yeah.
that, and that
Yeah.
and that comes, kind of from the top down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a hard slug, particularly in Australia, where access to
Yes.
capital is
Yeah.
very, very low.
Absolutely.
You have
Absolutely.
scenarios in
Yeah.
UK,
Mm,
Singapore, Los Angeles, etc., where it's a complete different landscape. In
mm,
Australia, you
mm,
need to be sophisticated to be an investor. Crowdfunding
mm.
is a thing, but not really a thing. There's a lot of
Yeah.
governance for good reasons, because
Yes.
they avoid fraud. But in the same
Yeah.
token, it
Yeah.
then limits growth, because an
Mhm.
angel investor can only invest a certain amount. And
Yeah.
somebody that's very, very high net worth,
Yeah.
it's very unlikely that they're going to throw 50,000 or 200,000 at a
Yeah.
business, because
Yeah.
it's meaningless for them. So
Yeah.
there's still that
Yeah.
misalignment between access of
Mhm,
capital and
mhm,
ideas. But I'm hoping that's going to
mhm.
change, because some of the most
Yeah.
brilliant ideas, brilliant minds, great businesses
Yeah.
are Aussie ones. So we need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
we need to wrap our arms around each other and
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
make them grow.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's excellent advice. I'm going to chop up your clip into smaller ones and highlight all these nuggets of information. So thank you, Pej, for your time. Really appreciate your time. And viewer, if you're watching this, soak it in because it's so good. So thanks, Pej, and have a lovely day. Really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
having on the show. Yeah.
Thank you. Lovely being
Thank
here. Thank you,
you.
Simon.
Yeah. Cheers.